All right, here's your lesson on solving equations. These are linear and these are quadratic equations. How can I tell which one's one? So if I look at the variable x, what's the exponent on x? And I don't see an exponent. That means it's 1. That means it's linear. It's just going in and out here. All right, to solve this equation, we're going to simplify it. We're going to, instead of adding 5, we're going to subtract 5. So let's do that. We know that when you have negative and a negative and you're in an adding or subtracting situations, these negatives, you add these negatives together. So negative 19 and negative 5, you add them together, that's negative 24. Divide by 2, and you get negative 12. Let's try that again. I know, my camera is going to settle down. Tell it to settle down. All right, number 2. Again, this is linear. I want to distribute. I want to simplify it. So that's negative 6 when you multiply. And then negative 3 times 7, that's negative 21. Look, what should my next step be to simplify this? There we go. Instead of negative 6, we're going to add 6. Oh, as soon as I say that, of course, there's the camera again. Now, when the signs are different, you're subtracting. What's 15 take away 6? And because we have more negatives, it'll be negative 9. Then divide by negative 21. And that's a fraction, which is fine. A negative divided by negative is positive. Divide by 3, and you get 3 over 7. Number 3. Let's solve this equation. So again, I want to simplify it. So 5 times 5 and 5 times 8, that's negative. To continue to simplify, we're going to add 40 to both sides. And then I'm going to divide. It doesn't go in evenly, which is fine. I'm going to divide by the biggest number I can think of, which is 5, top and bottom. So that's 18 and 5. All right, let's distribute this. That's negative 16x, that's negative 4. Let's keep simplifying this. So negative 4 and negative 5 together, that's negative 9. Keep simplifying it. You could go either way. I'm going to add 8x. You could also add 16. I'm also going to add 9. So negative 16 and 8, that's negative 8. These simplify, these simplify. 7 plus 9 is 16. So when I divide by negative 8, a positive divided by a negative, and you get the answer negative 2. Again, we're going to simplify. So we're going to multiply. So a negative times a negative. Then we're going to combine like terms. So I'm going to subtract 5x. I'm also going to add 16. So when I subtract here, I get 59. And here, this all, right, simplifies to 0. So when I divide, 0 divided by anything, the answer is going to be 0. All right, let's distribute. Let's distribute again. So we're multiplying. Oops, that's minus x. Nice. There's my equal sign. I'm going to combine like terms. So this is 21 minus 1. That's 20. I'm going to subtract 14. So 14 take away 14, 0. Again, when I divide by 0, the answer is 0. Oops, there I am. All right, turn the page. Now these are quadratic situations. So we're going to take the skill we had for factoring, that was our first lesson, and we're going to do that too if we might need to. So in this case, I only have an x squared, so I'm going to subtract 3. So 35, take away 3 is 32. I'm going to divide by 8. 32 divided by 8. And then I'm going to square root. So what number times itself is 4, but when you solve a quadratic, the answer could be positive or the answer could be negative. Why is that? Because positive 2 times positive 2, that's 4. Negative 2 times negative 2, that's also 4. So 2 possibilities. All right, number 8. Again, we're going to add 8. So 28 plus 8, let's say that's 36. It is. Divide by 81. Now, again, I'm going to square root this. I know we just talked about it. The answer is positive and negative. When you square root a fraction, just square root the top and square root the bottom. So what number times itself is 36 and what number times itself is 81? Now, I could actually simplify that down. So that's 2/3. And there you go. Number 9. Here we have an equation that's already factored. So when we have factors, we use what's called the zero product property. So if the first factor was 0, then 0 times anything is 0. If the second factor is 0, then 0 times anything is also 0. So 2 possibilities. So each factor equal to 0, solve it. So we're going to subtract 1. In this situation, we're going to add 1 and then divide by 5. So one answer is -1, and then the other answer is 1/5. 2, I like it 10. I like it when they're already factored. So each factor equal to 0, and just solve them separately. So instead of subtracting 4 to get x by itself, we're going to add 4. Instead of subtracting 8 to get x by itself, we're going to add 8. 2 answers. Most of the time for a quadratic, there's going to be 2 answers. Number 11. Again, it's factored. So we take each factor equal to 0 and solve it. So this situation, we're going to subtract 6 and then we're going to divide by 5. So the answer, and we can leave it this way, is -6 over 5. Here we're going to subtract 3 and then divide. So when I divide by 5, the answer is -3/5. Done. All right, number 12. All right, each factor equal to 0 and solve it. So we're going to add 4. We're going to add 4, and then we're going to divide. And I have my answer. All right, next page, a little more challenging because now you have to factor. So step 1 for this equation is it must be equal to 0, which it is. Then I'm going to factor it just like the first lesson we did. So 8 and -9, 2 numbers that multiply to 8 and add to -9. So negative times the negative is +8 and the add to -9. Then each factor I'm going to make equal to 0. So x minus 1, x minus 8. And then I solve each one and I have my 2 answers. So I'm going to add 8, add 1, and I have my 2 answers by factoring. Same thing here. So can I factor this? So 2 numbers that multiply to 7 and add to 8. Then each factor, so +1, +7, and then you solve them. So I'm going to subtract 1, I'm going to subtract 7, and I have my 2 answers. Again, I'm going to factor. Now, it's got to subtract, so it's got to be 6 and 1. So -6 times 1 and -6 plus 1, not 2 and 3. Then take each factor, so -6 and +1 equal to 0, and solve it. And it's done. Number 16, little trickier. So I got to go the first number times the last number. So what 2 numbers multiply to 15 and add to 16? So find those 2 numbers. We haven't factored it yet, so I'm going to just write down x plus 15, make it equal to 0. X plus 1, make it equal to 0. I'm not done yet. I'm going to divide by 5. So when I divide by 5, 15 divided by 5, is 3. And then if I solve that, subtract 3, and you get an answer. So one answer is -3. Here, 1 divided by 5, I can't simplify it. I don't need to slide because I'm solving for x. So just subtract that fraction to the other side. and you get your answer. So we had plus 1/5, subtract it, these cross out, and then you have your answer here on the other side. So you don't need to slide the denominator, just as a fraction, just subtract that fraction and you have your answer. All right, 2 more and the lesson's over. Here's a situation where we can just factor out a common factor. So both factors, you can just factor out an x, then take each factor equal to 0. So x equal to 0 or 2x plus 3. This is solved already. Subtract 3 and then divide by 2 and you have your answer. So the answer is negative 3 over 2. Number 18, back to what we did before. We need to take the first number times the last number. So 2 times negative 18 is negative 36, negative 9, and then find the two numbers that fit here. So for 9, I'm thinking negative 12 and 3. They multiply to negative 36 and they add to negative 9. So I'm going to write that down, negative 12 and 3. Then I'm going to divide by 2. So 12 divided by 2 is 6. So when I add 6, I have an answer. Here, 3 divided by 2 doesn't simplify, so just subtract that to the other side, and you have the second answer. And that could also be written as negative 1/5. Mr. G Math, over and out. There's your lesson on solving linear and quadratic equations. On to your own.